to session number 3, the rather obviously titled Gael Force. Sorry, it wasn't my best work. No, we're delighted to have this next panel, which, as I said earlier, it springs from a place of celebration. We've been so pleased with the responses to the various films coming through Cine Cahir, and we wanted to take a moment to explore the success of these films, to celebrate the beauty of the work, but also to look back and see where these have come from. And, you know, we're all kind of hyper conscious. Celine said I could do the little bit of history, but, you know, the phenomenon of Irish language film isn't new. And, you know, there's a long history from in the days of St. Patrick in 1920. Not a lot of people know that. So a feature film that actually was released with Irish and English intertitles. So way back then, the currency of the Irish language was acknowledged. But, you know, then we have the work of Louis Marcus with his Oscar-nominated Irish language films, and Bob Quinn, of course, who began to produce a counterpoint to the English language production that would have been predating the film board, and you know, a corrective to the kinds of images that were coming through Hollywood. So Irish language isn't a new phenomenon. We ourselves will be celebrating the work of George Morrison, who this year will be 100 years old when we screen Saoirse, his second part of what was to be a trilogy that began with Michelle. We're screening that on the 24th of June in the National Concert Hall with live orchestra. So we look forward to seeing you all there. There isn't a free ticket for everyone in the audience, but you can pay for your own tickets. So this panel, Gael Force, Celine Curtin has graciously agreed to host the panel. Celine, many of you will be familiar with, has worked in the film industry in the west of Ireland for many years. She was director of the Galway Film Centre, production manager in Roger Corman's Concord Studios in Connemara, project director on the National Cinemobile, which was Ireland's first travelling cinema, manager of the Galway Film Fair, chair of the Galway Film Centre and of UNESCO City of Film. Celine has taught in the Atlantic Technological University Film and Documentary Department since 2005 and was appointed head of the Department of Creative Arts and Media in 2018. So she's well placed to speak with this fine panel about her love of Irish language film and her love of Irish cinema. And I will hand over now to Celine Curtin. Thank you.
Well, it's great anyway. Look around, which we all know each other in the room, really. So it's more like a conversation. And that is what we're here to do this morning, to have a conversation about something wonderful that is afoot. So it's good. So I think what we do is let everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll start. So everybody will go down the line.
Okay, I'm Mariella Nichol, I'm TG Cahir, so commissioning manager of the commissioning department in TG Cahir. So I'll move on.
I'm Nell Roddy. I am the co-MD of Breakout Pictures, which is an independent film distribution company in Ireland, and we distributed Arrocht and On Calling Q.
Cuail McAneil, producer with Bacala Torrenta, and I produced Arrocht and soon Ocean Frank, which will be hitting your screens in September. That's my first book.
Colin Barrett is my name. I'm the writer and director of Oncoming Q.
Okay, great. And hello to everybody that we know. Okay, so I think, look, let's kickstart it off. And really, I think we've got to start with Cine Cahir. Now, also, I need to say, Maureen Conlon is here in the audience from TG Cahir as well. I told you she wasn't going to get away without opening her mouth at some point.
She's the editorial head.
So we can go after. So if we could, maybe you can talk about, you know, Cine Cahir. Many broadcasters would run a mile from feature films and stay away from it, have nothing to do with it. Yet here at TG Cahir, you went towards it, embraced it, and brought others on board, whatever. What? Why? Let's talk about it.
I suppose it was Alan's idea, Alan Esselmont's idea in TG Cahir, and he brought James Hickey, he's here today, he brought James Hickey and Ciarán Kazan together and pitched the idea of a closed scheme for Irish language drama. And really, they went on board straight away, I'd nearly say, James, it was quite quick. And we went at it enthusiastically. One of the main things was the matrix, which is the production fund was available. It was development for €25,000, and if you were successful, you had a budget of 1.2 to produce the film. So you knew that at the beginning. like, and that was that. So in the beginning, we were developing 5 dramas each year. I think the first 2 years were 5, and then we did 4. So there's 21 fully developed at this stage, and 6 produced, 2 in production this year, and 2 to be picked out of 4 developed this year also. So we're in a good place. Basically, by the end of this year, there'll be 8 city cars finished. So we're really excited about it. It's really worked. One of the core things of the whole idea was that it's an Irish language writer that comes on board. So it's authentic. The story is authentic. It's from an Irish language writer. It's not a translation, which is really important to us. I think that's it really. That's how it came about.
Okay. And you obviously wanted to get into the cinemas with Irish language.
Yeah, with regards, it was the cinematic experience, and to, I suppose, normalize Irish language in the cinemas, so that it's not always like on TG Cahir and only on TG Cahir, or in college or in schools, that it's actually you go to the cinema and you get that experience. It's normalizing it in the cinemas. And that's really proven to work at the moment. Like, I mean, and like all of them really have had a spell in the cinemas, and some more successful than others, but that's to be expected. So it's all about normalizing it and just the stories that will travel.
Okay, I know Cuan earlier, you're the kickoff point. You were the starter on some of this, and we talked earlier about internationalisation, etc. I mean, tell us for you when you started out with this.
Well, what was great about it, as we all know, was the fact that actually it was defined. It was an absolute, like, it was something we've all been in rooms where wouldn't it be great to work on, or could we, or where we get. But this was an absolutely defined scheme. It meant that if you were shortlisted, you were given 25 grand to develop the scripts. You could lock a writer in a room and throw away the key, and they'd have to type away. And even if you were rejected, if you weren't going to get production funding, you still had a script. You still had a product that you could then go to market, one of which I'm doing. So what was great about it was exactly that. You knew you were aiming, and you could practically, looking at TG Cahir's and Screen Ireland sort of schedule, you could go, okay, well, we'll submit then, we hopefully get a yes then, therefore we could be shooting then. And then you could almost immediately start talking to DOPs, you could start talking to actors, and so you could actually plan it. Obviously, you had to get over the hurdle of actually being, but on paper, at any rate, you could plan it. Well, if you shoot it there, we could aim for that and all that. So that was just such a clear runway, a clear path. I mean, it's very hard to make a film in any language, but no Irish language films had existed for a while. There was Kings, obviously, 10 years before that. But so you could plan for it, and it is more difficult to make a film in Irish at that time because they hadn't been made. So there were prejudices, there were hurdles, unforeseen ones as well as but you could aim for it. And then we were lucky enough to be selected, first of all as the developed project, secondly then to go to production, and so the turnaround, I'm going to tell you, was it a year? I don't even know. Yeah, and we were filming. I mean, obviously there was an awful lot of dramas and hurdles. I mean, 1.2, as we know, it is what it is. But it actually even meant that you, at your script stage, you had to be your own, financial editor. Like that's a great scene, but we can't afford to. There's no way we can. We chose to shoot a period piece with water and children and all the rest of that. I don't know what we were thinking, but we had to. We were even to plan that, so we were able to jump hurdles that because we had time to plan it, and knowing that we could plan it, and we were in charge of it. And I say this respectfully, but there wasn't interference from Screen Ireland or TG Cahir in terms of this was the film we wanted to make, and we went about to try and make it. So it was great, and we were. I mean, I won't mention the C word. I won't mention go, but we obviously were to originally go earlier into the cinema, and we all know what happened. But we had our debut in Tallinn in 2019. So within 18 months from empty page to world premiere, it happened, and that energy, and it's very hard to sustain an energy for a project, particularly if it takes years. That was fully focused and fully formed, and so it's an amazingly brilliant, simple scheme that produced, to date, I haven't seen them all, but I've seen 4 of them, 4 great films that will stand the test of time, and you can have a festival in 20 years' time of Irish language film. I mean, we were in London together, and there was 4 features shown over 2-3 days, and you just 4 4 years ago, you couldn't even have imagined that.
Yeah, no, there is a wonderfulness to the brevity in terms of here it is to get it made, because having been around the film fair for a long time, I've seen a lot of people dragging in for years after trying to put that money together. And the energy for the project kind of, I'm not saying it dissipates, but it's hard to maintain it. So it's a very, it is very dynamic, and it is doing something very wonderful. Do you want to come in there now then where?
Yeah, so I suppose we came in, Kuan asked myself and my business partner Robert to watch Aracht. So we would watch kind of a lot of Irish films in general, all of them really, and decide if we can to distribute them. So we saw Aracht, and I suppose from a distributor's point of view, we're looking at it in a way not as an Irish language film, just as, is this a good enough film that we want to get on board with, that we feel there's audiences for, that we think cinemas will support. So we kind of spoke to Kuan about that and made a play for it and decided we'd work together on it. And as Kuan said, we wanted to release it. I think it was just as lockdown was happening. So we just did it, and we had the premiere in Diff. It went fantastically well. So I suppose we kind of come on board and try to put a strategy together for the film and help with all kind of the marketing materials. What kind of trailer do we want? What kind of key art? What's the kind of overall release plan? And work really closely then with the producer and the director, and kind of come up with a plan for the film and a release. And that's kind of what we did with Aracht. And
they did more than that. Now, in fairness to now,
that was it. It was 1 week's work.
No, I mean you guys know this to get validation on any level. So like you work in a room, you work in your own thing. You're doing all this, and then to show it to somebody else who then goes, "This is great," and you know, if tears didn't run down my, you know, it was absolutely brilliant, because then you could do the back end of it as well in terms of, like, let's aim for this. You know, people ask you, one of the questions is, what's your strategy? What's your festival strategy? Your festival strategy is submit to them all and see who says yes, and then reverse engineer it. So, but having and we talked about cinema dates, having that, and then you can go, okay, well, you know, Glasgow, Diff. And then what's just before that, so you could create some momentum.
Yeah. So you're kind of looking at it as a big jigsaw and kind of going, okay, well, when do we want to release this film? Who do we want to release it to? How are we going to release this film? Where are we going to start the life cycle of this film? And as Kuan mentioned, where's the festival at that time? Festivals were a bit tricky. They were kind of downsizing a lot of the films they were taking because of COVID. But as you know, went to Tallinn, got a great Screen Daily review. So you kind of go, all right, okay, great. We've got a great trade review. Now let's get the Irish press to kind of watch it. Let's get them involved. And you kind of amalgamate all of this, and then you come up like month by month. What are we going to do? And then it did fantastically well in the cinemas, really, in that was October. And it was, I suppose, to be fair to Aracht, it broke the mold for Irish language cinema. Pre that, it was, I think, King's, which was on maybe 80,000. So, you know, it was phenomenal what Aracht got to do, because it paved the way, I think, for something like On Calling Hume then to come along a few months later, and for audiences not to think about it as an Irish language film, for people to just go, these are really good films, people are talking about these films, we want to go see these films. And I suppose that's what the scheme is all about. And for a distributor, we need it not to be about, you know, in a way people don't care if it's an Irish language film, they just want to go see good films. And then kind of on an international level, being able to work with other distributors and other territories. And if you're selling to Netflix or you want to talk to Channel 4, you know, they need to just see them as films. And what are people saying about these films? And what festivals are taking these films? And what are the trade press saying about it? So that's kind of where we come in to kind of try and make all that fit a little bit.
But emotionally, it was a huge moment. It was like...
It was a huge learning. Like it had never really been done.
No.
And to see like a lot of the school children. I think actually for both titles we worked quite closely with schools as well, and as a new kind of audience to go see these kind of films as well, and really tapping into that. It was just wonderful to see, like, you know, hundreds of kids going to see an Irish language film about famine at the time. It was just, it's just phenomenal that can now happen, and that there's this level of trust now, I suppose, with Irish language films, or just Irish films, you know, and just, so then we came on board, I suppose, and then watched on Colleen Coon before it went to Berlin. Thank God we got in before all the hype. I thought it was wonderful, and loved it, and started working with Colin and Cleona. So I don't know, Colin, if you want to talk about that whole, it's still out there in cinemas doing fantastically well.
Yeah, it's still going. Yeah, I suppose just to go back to the sort of genesis of the project, it was as many people already know, it's actually based on an English language work by Claire Keegan called Foster, which is a long short story that you'd read in about half an hour. And I suppose in a way that points to the, like, in a weird way, I never thought of Colleen Coon as an Irish language film. I just thought of it as making a film, and these characters, it's set in a world where the Irish language exists. And I think all my short films, that was my first feature film, but all my short films I'd done prior to that had all been through schemes in which TG Carr were involved. So Irish language has always been part of my fiction filmmaking. But equally, actually, I think they've all, bar one maybe, been bilingual. So like the English, there's always English in there in some shape or form, which is sort of a reflection, I think, of my own experience. Like I grew up in Dublin with my dad only ever spoke Irish to us, and my mum spoke English, and so the two languages sort of always, Irish always sort of existed with English in a way in my life. So and I'm kind of interested in reflecting that in films, in Irish language films, that it's not, unless you have a good reason, like Art obviously is that makes total sense that entire film is in the Irish language and given its period and its setting, but I do kind of like, there's a part of me that just likes to sort of acknowledge the sort of linguistic reality of Irish society in that regard. But yeah, so like it was, as Kuan said, like we got shortlisted for Cine Cahir the year before we were picked for Colleen Coon. So we went through that development process. It's amazing, like each project gets €25,000. So the writer and the producer, director, they developed the project up to kind of maybe second, third draft or something. And that process is just, invaluable. It's extraordinary, And even though we didn't get picked in that round, it was just an amazing experience. And you have suddenly, you've written a feature film. And to have missed out then, it kind of sharpens your instincts going into the next round. I was like, okay, I really want to get one of these Cine Cahrs if I can. And yeah, I mean, just the whole, I just think it's a testament to TG Cahir and Screen Ireland in terms of that, just very forward thinking, and that's been my experience through the years with all of the kind of various development programs that I've been part of. Like TG Cahir did a wonderful sort of program that they ran for several years. I think it started in 2009 maybe. I took part in 2010. It was called Uther, the one I did. So it was like the Moonstone program that used to be in effect maybe 10 years before that, where they picked like 6 directors and 6 writers, and they paired a director with a writer to make a short drama. And but the beautiful thing was there was like a whole week of workshops that you got to do before you ever went near the making of the film, and you were paired with a mentor. So like that year I had Declan Rex as my mentor, and we were all down like the Rusnaroon set, and you would get a full crew, and you would get to direct scenes from your script, and you would have a director like Declan watching you direct, and then he'd give you notes in your direction afterwards, and then you'd have to go into an editing suite with an editor, an established editor, and you'd have like 2 hours to cut your scene together, and then you'd have to present it to all the mentors, and they'd give you feedback. And it was just such an intense experience. But again, it was just like, that's all. I think TG Cahir were just developing this talent pool almost unbeknownst to people, you know what I mean? That there was, and I've always believed that there's this sort of latent talent pool in terms of Irish language filmmakers that's now sort of coming to light through this thing now, this Cine Cahir scheme. Whereas prior to that, there maybe wasn't any kind of realistic avenue for filmmakers to get an Irish language feature film off the ground. I mean, it was always in theory possible, and that Screen Ireland would always accept it, but maybe just the kind of commercial realities of it weren't kind of I don't know, maybe just weren't understood or weren't there wasn't maybe a belief in it or something like that. I'm not sure, but I do think it required.
We had the luxury of BCI at the time, the BAI as well, that funded that.
Oh, sorry,
for
for
3
the
years.
scheme,
For
yeah.
the scheme,
Yeah, so
it was quite expensive. That it was
Yeah.
a luxury.
it was amazing because we got
amazing
100,000. It was 100,000 euro per film.
half hour. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was extraordinary.
But you're absolutely right, because there's a scale initiative as well.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
all of these initiatives going
Scale
on.
and
Yeah.
Shield. There was
You know,
3.
And there was Oscars before that,
And
which
there was
I
Oscars
did.
before
I
that,
did three shorts through Oscars.
That's-
I mean, I sat in the cinema in Cork with a film called Lip Service, which was completely in Irish, and 600 people breaking their shites laughing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just that rush again of kind of going, this can happen if you know, to Ray Liotta's, you know, but if you build it, they will come. And like it was there, you could see it. If people are not, they're agnostic. If it's a good film,
Yeah.
it's a good film. They don't bring their own prejudices. We maybe cause some of that, and hopefully these films and the scheme will keep breaking those walls down.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, as you say, Colin. I mean, there's been this development going on. This isn't like something abode from the blue that this is happening. It doesn't work like that. There's been all this because I would have to just remember at this moment Maureen O'Hoole, who had such a wonderful vision for the West. I mean, we're the poorer for her loss, but she had a wonderful instinct for anybody could do anything. She kind of reminds me a bit of Corman. Corman always believed anybody could do anything, and you need someone to believe in that and to generate initiatives, etc. That can give people the kickstart, etc. Just kind of to come back around, kind of to the films themselves. Can you talk a bit about the importance of maybe the international quote? Your films have gone to festivals, international festivals, and done very well. I read like for Santa Barbara, audience gave Rush August Frank an award. I think an audience award is better than any jury any day in my books. It is, because it means they get the film. Right?
Yeah,
You want the
it's
audience to get your film, and obviously Colin as well. Can you talk about that, and then kind of, as I say, bringing it all back home?
It's a funny words to use, thinking of the TV, because I don't know whether what I'm about to say is true or not, but I believe it, so this is what I did. I believe that we shouldn't release Arach first to an Irish audience. I believed that we, for whatever 800 years of oppression, for whatever, that actually we needed an international context to say that it was okay that this was a good film. And that series from whatever 25 years ago that kind of did all that in terms of music. So we weren't going to open in Dublin, we weren't going to open in Galway, we weren't going to open in Cork. It needed, I believed, an international one. And what was interesting, even when we were trying to do the opening of the film in terms of establishing the date and all that kind of thing, there was all these, we had different viewers in Ireland. Oh, you need to explain this. Oh, you need to explain that. Oh, you need to explain all of these things for people to understand the context of the film. And my whole instinct was, no, we just start the film as every film starts. And when I started to show it to friends of mine, and I lived in England for a while, I showed it to friends of mine there, they went, just start the film. And that is what we did. We showed it in Tallinn, and we had, I rented a cinema in Soho and played it to reviewers there. Some were going to Tallinn, some weren't. And we got a Screen Daily review, and it worked. It then became an international film, and the context, whether, and we had 100 conversations. Do we need to explain what a landlord is? Do we need to explain the all of this sort of stuff? And we're all burdened with far too much knowledge about all our history, and you're trying to squish it all in, and actually just the relief of actually just removing it. And interestingly, I mean, unfortunately, I didn't get to go to town because my father passed, but every country has, and particularly in the current, they had their own famine, and this was, poverty is universal and oppression is universal, and yes, the context is different or whatever, and that's how people viewed it. They viewed it in that context. So it helped enormously, both from our self-belief in our own, that actually this was a good film, this would travel, and we could then build around that and not over-explain it and not doing that. And the language, again, there's whatever 7 billion people in the world, 500 million approximately have English as first language, and to everybody else, every other film is a foreign language. So again, you're showing it to Estonians, and they're not burdened by, I had a terrible Irish language teacher in school, or blah, blah, blah. Like, all of that's just gone, and they're looking straight at the film. And you know, it is being judged literally on that merit, and you know, you can change the subtitles to German, to, you know, to any language you choose. So that was, as I say, not a popular decision at the time. You know, I had to kind of go, no, I'm not doing that, but I just, that was what I believed, and that it would then just land, and that was what was so important with Nell was, and with Robert, is just to solidify that belief that actually this is an international film.
Then I went to
Yeah, I went to Glasgow and one of the audience were there,
yeah.
and you know, it bounced
You're
out.
making all these audience films.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, it's the end of the triangle for me. I mean, there's the writer, there's the, you know, but the end of it, in the end, somebody has to sit and watch it, and that person has to enjoy it, and whatever that word enjoy means, but they have to kind of, and it completes it. So you know, like, I'm a big believer in audience previews. We did it with Aracht, we did it with Rochelle Frank. Is somebody in the room might have a better idea than your idea. You know, somebody might just say, "Oh, hang on," you know, and there were very small sometimes, but the little stumbling blocks, particularly in the early parts of the film, that an audience preview screening helps. So it just solidifies your belief. Obviously, you have to start off with your belief in the filmmaker, in the script, you know, and all that. But in the end, why not garner as much information from? And again, the other sort of thing, and you know, us paddies travel, and there's paddies everywhere, and like, you know, we got a really nice write up from the Guardian in a separate sort of a piece, because, you know, the guy there's, you know, there was a network, and it seemed to, they were proud of the film, so they wanted to promote it. They weren't just giving us propaganda; they actually were genuinely proud of it as Irish people. So it was sort of popping up everywhere, and I went, actually, yeah. So they're bringing it all back home then, when it didn't quite happen the way because of COVID, you know, like, we were on that trajectory to land in the cinema in April, and obviously 15 months or 17 months, whatever, passed, and we never know quite what it would have done, because we were, you know, there was a role, but anyway, we got to the cinema, which was for all of us hugely important.
It's opened on over 50 cinemas.
Yeah. And then
amazing,
we got slightly, anyway, there was another
bit of
whatever.
But anyway,
yeah,
we got there in the
yeah,
end.
we got there.
Yeah.
And Colin, in terms of you, were like Berlin. That's how that felt, as they say.
Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, I suppose similar to what I was saying earlier, it's like, you know, we never sort of put any barriers, you know, around our ambition for the film. You know, we were trying to make I was trying to make a film that would sort of stand shoulder to shoulder with films that I like, that I would come and see in the IFI or whatever. You know, that's because otherwise, you know, why are you doing it? So I suppose we always kind of had high ambitions for it. And then it's that moment that you talk about where you get that validation from a third party who doesn't, particularly someone actually outside of Ireland, is really powerful. So like we had a what's called like a producer's rep, who was like almost like a manager for the film. So a very well respected woman who's Spanish, who saw the film and decided to take it on and help us with our festival strategy and all that kind of stuff. So to get that kind of vindication was a big moment. And then and for someone like that to believe that no, you're going to get into one of the big festivals, like this film is good enough to do that. And then it's just a waiting game. It's, you know, that's kind of it's slightly torturous, because, you know, you've got like Cannes and Venice, and then you're kind of waiting around. Like Berlin is like another 6 months down the line, and so we were almost like ready. We just missed out on Cannes, and then Venice was like, oh, it was a weird time in that, like, post-COVID, like the festivals were still figuring themselves back out as well, and there are a lot of them had smaller rosters and all that. But anyway, yeah, we got chosen for Berlin, which was, yeah, like I did literally jump in the air and like fist pump and all that kind of stuff. That was amazing. That's like dream come true stuff, you know.
Then I suppose from there, then Curzon saw it in Berlin. Then I guess.
Curzon would have seen it there, so that kind of led then to our distribution in the UK and all that. So but yeah, like it's that thing though. Like you do want to hold your world premiere status if you can for, you know, one of the bigger festivals if possible, and that it just makes it a more attractive proposition to the festival if they can be the first to present it. So it does make a certain amount of sense to, if you really believe in your film, to try and hold on to that. Now, not all festivals. Some festivals will allow you have a domestic premiere, like at the FLA or whatever like that. But it's we were certainly of the opinion that we should hold on. Like similarly, I think the FLA did reach out to us, and we did just say, well, we're trying to sort of launch this, you know, a little further down the line. So, and that all paid off. Then it was that thing then about creating momentum. We just had this extraordinary run. So like Berlin was early February, and then we won 2 awards in Berlin, and that kind of became a news story here. Then like we were on like Morning Ireland in the airport, like, and it just creates this sort of snowball that just kind of hasn't stopped since. And then we were the opening film at DIFF, and then we won the audience award at DIFF and the critics award, and then the IFTAs was just insane, and just it was just like a perfect storm that then just led into the release. And now, like, it looks like this week we're going to pass like 500,000.
Yeah, tonight, I think.
500,000.
Wow.
Amazing.
The Milky Birds are on you.
Yeah.
What dessert will we have? No, I mean, it is remarkable.
Yeah.
I suppose in one way, you know, probably I suppose it's funny because for all week I've been kind of going, it's kind of strange we're talking about this specific Irish language. They're Irish films, you know. It's important to look at them separately, but I mean, that's what they are at the end of the day. Can we just go back to just, you know, because everybody in this room knows that, you know, especially in Europe, as opposed to the Americans, we're not great at putting the old money into development. And, you know, development is absolutely central. And I mean, for you guys, you've mentioned and you touched on it, but can you just kind of elaborate a little bit more? I mean, how you made that 25,000 work for you and the time and that you had to give to them.
Yeah, well, again, because you knew that if you got this, you could, you potentially had a start date. And I'm making this up from memory. I'm going to say that, I'd say 2/3 of it or thereabouts, 60%, whatever, went to Tom to go to sit in a room. But also you could engage a script editor with it. You weren't having to. Like immediately we were able to phone up. Oh no, I can pay for this. You weren't looking for favors. You know, so you could set up, you know, a schedule for Tom, and Tom hadn't written a feature film before, so you know it was incredibly daunting for him, and you know, doing that. But you could build support around him while simultaneously then talking to DPs, beginning to look at where you could shoot this, what your problems were. And so then when you were able to come back to, you know, when Tom got to draft 1, you already had more information. There's no way we can film this.
Yeah.
was the you know, as in we can't build sets, so we don't have any financing in place to build sets for this. So therefore we had to find the location, and so you're doing that, and you're feeding that practical information back into the script. So the writers, who in this case was also the director, was able to actually inform himself of what he's going to do. So if he's trying to make the character do X or Y, well, you can't do it that way. So he has to find another, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you know, necessity, mother invention, and all that kind of stuff. So you're honing your script, and you're able to do it with, as I say, you're able to meet production designers, look at films. You know, again, in terms of the kind of ingenuity you're looking for. I mean, our production designer on Art, the fact that you don't see, you know, most of his work is testament to what he did. I mean, all of that actually went out the fucking window, because day 1 we had a storm and destroyed our set, and we were utterly fucked for the rest of the shoot. But that's a different story. But you know, on day 1 we were in good stead. We had a good script that was attractive to actors. We were able to bring, you know, send it out. Michael McLaughlin did a great job. You know, we were able to do that and strategize on how to achieve what Tom's intentions were.
So the strict parameters really actually suited.
Yeah,
They
totally.
helped.
Totally.
You know, you went out with something that was achievable within budget. We all know everything.
And maybe
was
also
limited.
within that, the 5 projects were being developed at the same time, so
Mhm.
everybody had to deliver at the same time.
No pressure.
So
pressure.
like
Yeah.
it wasn't just
Yeah.
you were aware like that you had to be in on the date because it was going from 5 to 2.
Yeah, it was good. You know,
Yeah.
they gave money to 5, and then
Yeah.
we came to 2. So yeah, it's just, and then obviously at none of that point, obviously, am I being paid, or you know? So, but I'm able to arrange my other work then around that, so you can, you know, you're able to just plan first. Yeah.
And in terms of like, you know, say shooting it and crew and casting, you know, obviously let's go look at casting. Obviously, you know, we know the pool of actors in a country this size is small, but then when we're trying to have people to speak credible Irish, and then also even the notion of dialects, having different dialects that you won't buy if it's Timmy from Donegal is supposed to be Paddy from Connemara's brother. We're not going to buy it because the dialects are so
that's if you're thinking from it. So I may disagree here a little bit with TGR. That's if you believe all that. So
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched American films. I don't know whether they're really from Texas or not.
okay.
We do, because we actually know their mother and their father and their brother's second cousin, and actually
Yeah.
no, that's not.
Yeah.
You can get into that.
Mm.
I was taking a kind of I'm a native Irish speaker, but I'm from Dublin, so
Yeah.
I was taking a lot looser view of it, as in from the outset.
Yeah.
If we couldn't find it, I wasn't going to make that a hurdle. And if you think of something like Poutine, there's a Donegal man speaking to a Dublin man, speaking to a Connemara man who's speaking to so but it's a good film, so we'll suspend reality in that way, and again, depending on who we would have got, we could have repositioned their characters, and they could have been, if they were Donegal, and I'm making this up, but if we got a great Donegal actor, we could back logic his backstory into it. So we were in charge of that. So at that point of writing, so so it wasn't. So I was less concerned about that. But obviously, once you put Donal into the position, you are really trying to make. He has to have a brother that has to be the same Irish, and you could have some scope with the wife, because she could have come from 14 parishes away or whatever. But so you're trying to build a credible on-screen family. As you would do, and we talked about getting dialect coaches, and we talked about all that. But for that not to be a limiting factor at the outset, as it turned out, fairness to Irish people, we're pretty fucking good at acting, and there's actually a lot of them, and more than you think, and even actors who, because by the nature of being an actor, like you're inclined to have a good ear, and some of them may be able to speak it, but aren't totally up to, but that can all be helped and nudged along and fixed and all that stuff. But we didn't have a problem with casting it, to be honest.
What about you, Colin?
I do think it's a slight issue in terms of talent pool for cast. Like, I just think it is difficult. It kind of gets more difficult strangely for certain demographics, and but I do think it is trickier, like for instance, like the character of Sean in ours, who played wonderfully by Andrew Bennett. Like I was really scratching my head for that, and that before I actually discovered that Andrew Bennett had Irish and had been in Irish language productions. Because I knew Carrie Crowley from the beginning. I kind of had her in mind for the role, and but I was just having real trouble with that particular age bracket of the Sean character, which I just don't think you would have I've never, all my drama has been in Irish language, so I'm not sure, but I just don't think you would have that problem if you're doing an English language film, for instance. So yeah, I don't know, like this, it's just one of those things. Like, it's naturally going to be a smaller talent pool, and then I understand what Kuan's saying, but I would have a certain thing about, even though I don't I don't like films to be exclusively in Irish, I do kind of like the Irish to be, again, it's about being truthful to the social reality. I do like it to be correct in terms of, or as correct as possible to the setting and the character, which is kind of what you're saying anyway. And you were saying you can mix the dialects, but then you have to almost like explain it, or there has to be some backstory that makes sense if it's a Donegal Irish speaking person with Connemara or whatever, so yeah, I mean, I do think it's like tricky, and I'd love to see if Cine Car is going to be something that's still around in like 20 years, and we'll have this wonderful canon of Irish language cinema. You would love to see, I don't know, whether it's like actors just getting more enmeshed in the language, and that talent pool can just grow because there's an acknowledgement that, well, there's actually great cinema being made in the Irish language, and we actually need then this talent pool to service that. I'm not sure what the answer is in terms of how that is developed, but if I was a young actor, I'd certainly be looking up Quaylin's.
It's supply and demand.
Yeah, they write down things like, I can horse ride and I can sword fence, so then it's just
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in terms of kind of, obviously, in a way, we tend to think of, I mean, you guys are Dublin, and Irish speakers, and obviously there's a huge amount of Irish speakers in Dublin. But do we tend to locate Irish speaking cinema in a rural setting in our minds? naturally as Irish people?
I don't, but 1.2 buys you so much cinema. And
The landscape is what buys you.
yeah, so you know you have to
And
you know
COVID.
you have to pick your battles.
Yeah.
You know we're half rural country, half urban. You know.
Yeah.
So you know they are small films, not by aspiration or whatever, but in terms of scale. So you know, yeah. So it's so I don't think that the you know like we did lip service whatever 20 something years ago. It was an urban film and made perfect sense within that logic. So you know you've got to be realistic on your budget. You know, somebody writes down a helicopter, Irish speaking helicopter pilot flying to, you know, you go, well, I don't know whether I can do that. You know,
Yeah.
so
but is it a budget thing though? Because you could equally have like there's no reason that you couldn't have something set in an urban setting that's not necessarily adding to your budget in a major way.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the
It's
service
more-
is
it's more
urban, but you
It's
know,
more to do with like just the perception of the language
Perception,
belonging
yeah.
to a rural setting, which is
you
well,
know,
you know, it's because the Gaeltachts are all
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There is naturally
because-
locations.
which is like most of us, you know, there are a lot of Irish people's only experience with the Gaels is to go on that school tour and for that 2 weeks and whatever, and therefore that's the association. But I mean, I grew up in Dublin. I learned English in an Irish school in Dublin. You know, all my brothers, cousins, you know, there's a lot of us hidden in plain sight here. So that's not my perception. My perception is, you know, I'm an urbanite.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that film though, right? Like
Yeah,
set in that,
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
set
what I
in that
mean.
Dublin.
Yeah, and if I did that, and I opened in Berlin, I you know, to be judged on whether it's good or bad film. Here, the opening thing is this is a slightly unbelievable thing because people would be bringing, and that's what I mean by and hopefully these films begin to kind of
But if you create that world, I think it's believable.
like Roshan Frank is, and you know, we've got all sorts of demographics, we've got all sorts of people within it, ethnic and otherwise, and whatever, and it's an entirely believable world in the that happens to be being spoken in Irish language. And the Irish language plays no plot part in it. It's not in any way. It's you know, the dog even can speak Irish. We had special training for that, but yeah, so it's not it's about the world you're creating and the cinema moment you're creating, and then you know, the language, as I say, like for me, you know, I learned English. It comes. I have to think. I think in Irish, and so English language film. I mean, this isn't true. It's the foreign language film for me. If you know what I mean, that's not true. It's a stretch. It's a above argument version of it, but yeah.
But there's
I
a
mean,
different
It is a
truth.
truth.
Yeah.
That is a truth.
That is my truth.
That
Yeah,
is,
that is my truth.
Yeah, but so what do you guys have to make an urban drama absolutely in Irish? Just I think because there's so many Irish people in urban settings, and I think in a way that will crack something open again. And I think it's important. I think, you know, it's kind of like it's a little bit hidden, and we all know it exists. You know, the urban Irish speaker is the minority within the minority existing. You know.
My first short film.
Finky is urban. Most of it's set in.
Finky
Yeah,
is
I
urban.
said
Yeah.
that earlier on, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real city experience.
Yeah.
But also then kind of moving on then in terms of the crewing, was kind of, you know, trying to make the films in an Irish speaking kind of environment.
You mean from a practical point of view, like behind the
Finding
camera?
crew and behind camera, how do you kind of, are you know, we all obviously there's always aspirations when you're making something. I know I was involved with Irish language shorts, and you try to have many Irish language speakers, whatever. But is it a challenge, like obviously with casting as well?
It is a challenge. Lots of people, you know, and also like both films, both Aracht and Conkin were shot by the same person who's you know, a genius, but she doesn't speak Irish. So in terms of that, you know, the DOP on set determines, you know, they're very much a leader on set, and a lot of things go through them and it comes from them. But we cast the crew as much as we did the cast. So there was, if people, you know, and on our call sheets and everything, I mean, we were sort of just playing game. We were sort of pretending we were back at school, and it was like word of the day of the thingy. We were given prizes for, because it was important to create a culture of acceptance that this was not just, we happen to be doing this. This was bigger than this. And again, hopefully, as in 20 years' time, there's still City Car, but it's important to establish that we're serious about this. We're trying to make great films, but we're actually trying to make great films in this medium through this, because if the authenticity sits there, you know, I don't know, this isn't real, but you know, it'll come back from out of the screen onto the audience. It'll feel like everybody gave up all the way down the line, and all those small percentage points matter, particularly on a you know, when your budget is limited. So for me, it was very important. From editor to do whatever, wherever possible, to find and you know, make sure that the person. But even if they didn't have it, you know, nobody was excluded because they didn't have it.
Yes.
But that the respect and the creativity was accepted. This is, you know, so.
Just to add to that, like I wasn't at Teelan, but I was at Berlin with Colleen Kuhn. Like all of the actors were there, well not all of them, but the main crew and our cast, and they all spoke Irish to us. Myself and Marnie Hunlon were there, and they spoke Irish to us. It was like Colm Cleona, everybody. It was an Irish language experience for us all. Like it was just amazing. Like, and some people came up Irish, you know, that were in Germany, and again they they started the conversation in Irish.
Good.
So it wasn't forced, and it was. It's just it becomes more normalized.
Yeah.
And that was definitely the experience on set, like with the cast. You know, that it was all the interaction is in Irish. You know? But then, like as Kuman says, like it's not really practical to try. You can't crew an entire crew, you know, with Irish speakers.
But in another 5 years.
But yeah.
Yeah, well, you see, that's you're not going to force the thing, because the most important thing is to make the film. But I mean, I do think in a way, I mean, genuinely mean it. I think what has been done is remarkable. And I think it'll create a dynamic and an energy in this country around the Irish language again. I think, you know, the revolution has started again. I think it's really exciting in terms of, and a positive revolution is the wrong term, but it's a wonderful time for people who wanted to tell stories in the Irish language, you know, and that is, as I say, there will be a canon of work, and that this is just the beginning of it, you know. We'll be remembering going, oh, we were there. You know, as such. Does anybody from the audience want to ask anything?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Absolutely.
Now, I was just wondering about the marketing of Colleen Kuhn, and were there heated debates around whether
Thankfully,
you...
I don't know, Colin.
No, were there heated debates around whether you would market it as on Colleen Kuhn or The Quiet Girl, and does that differ where you go elsewhere?
Yeah, there was conversations around that. And I suppose Curzon are going for The Quiet Girl, which I suppose is interesting in a way, because it's not that they don't want to have an Irish language film in the UK, you know, they just kind of thought for a lot of, you know, whether it's Spanish, French, Italian, they will often have it as an English language title for that audience. Whereas we felt here, I suppose, that maybe we'd go with On Colleen Kuhn, and it was, I don't know, just be truthful about it in a way. And this is what it was. We were never trying to hide the language. It was never about that. And then for Aract, it was more a case of, there was no definite translation. I think it was Monster was the closest. And we kind of discussed it a little bit, whether it was maybe Monster. And then we were like, oh, that's kind of off-putting. But then we were like, can people say Aract? And I'm not an Irish language speaker. So we were like, oh, I don't know. But we felt, again, that to be truthful to the film. So, they were both kind of quite different. But I think, for outside of Ireland, they will probably always be translated to an English language title. And that is just purely to get as many audiences in and to make it as appealing as possible to audiences.
It's like another round. Nobody knows that that's actually called Druk or whatever whatever the title is. You know, it's just a market reality that you have to.
But nice that you had the confidence in Irish audiences to come and see Colleen Kuhn.
Yeah, and in a way, I suppose, and you always said at Colin and Fiona, was that like on Colleen Kuhn, everybody knows what that. Even if you've got very basic Irish, you're like, okay, well, I know that much. So it wasn't. If it had been much more complicated, I think you probably would have been like, oh God, is this now? Some exhibitors, I won't name names, definitely think box office was lowered because we went with on Colleen Kuhn. So, you know, I don't know. I think ultimately.
I think in respect to G. Garler and Screen Ireland, in terms of Feast Ireland, in terms of the thing, you know, I think in Irish it should be in the Irish language. I think just, you know, And because there've been sort of good films now, and you can choose to watch Colin Kuhn and like it, or after not like, but there's more than one coming. So that confidence to just
It's important.
yeah, I think it is
It
important. Yeah. The international is a different
business.
conversation. It's a different conversation. We had Roshan Van, we used to be called McGraw Bowen, which is actually, for Irish because there's like there's genitive form, there's Tishel Guinness.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah,
Don't go
exactly.
there.
So,
Don't mention it.
it's a lumpy title. It actually in Irish didn't even land the film, so it's changed to Russian Frank. But and look, we got to be thinking about marketing wherever we are, and it's not, but the heart is in the right place from all of us. So then it's like, what's the best title for the film?
And Roshan Frank is.
And Roshan Frank.
I know it is,
Absolutely.
yeah. And also because now when you look at art, Monster is totally meaningless in
Yeah.
that film. I wouldn't go
like
there.
art is a monster word. It's not a physical manifestation. It's a thing. So it didn't even translate well in that space. It's
And the word, just the spelling of it, and you could have a fair go to.
Yeah.
It
Could
was a
have
bit
a fair
like being
go at it,
called
yeah.
the Colin Kuhn, possibly the Kuhn in the UK is been called IFA, and you could be called anything,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Sorry, Fionnuala. And then
can I
Roddy.
just ask, what's really striking about the works that have come out of the scene is the quality. I mean, you can see the development on screen and the high quality of all the works. But I'm just wondering, do you think the fact that they're not dialogue heavy is a factor as well? Like, it's not pushing Irish at you. They're all spare, or certainly Alex and Colin Kuhn not.
Yeah, I've had this discussion with people before, and people kind of wonder, is that a conscious decision to sort of minimize the use of art? But I'm not entirely sure that. Well, maybe in the case of like when Colin Kuhn is a very quiet film anyway. But if you were to make it in English, you wouldn't have any more dialogue in it,
Yeah.
And then art wouldn't be massively dialogue heavy, I suppose. But equally, I'm not sure it's certainly in our instance it wasn't like a conscious decision to try and minimize the language or anything. And I'd say if you were to compare other kind of independent cinema titles from the UK or France or whatever, Scandinavia, true cinema isn't really dialogue based.
They're very European films, though. I mean, I think that's
Yeah, well, maybe that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Can I just say that as well, to add to that? Like, I think the Irish language writer is crucial to that.
Yes.
They're not translations.
Yeah.
They're actually written in Irish, and it helps.
fundamental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Translations tend to be way more wordy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Fosca as well doesn't have a huge amount of dialogue
No, it
in
doesn't.
either.
Yeah.
Right, Roddy.
You may have to speculate in the answer to this, but I'm just wondering about the extent to which the fact that the films are in Irish is actually really a benefit when you come to sell them internationally, because maybe a lot of our English language Irish cinema doesn't have that identity as being Irish particularly. But for foreign audiences, maybe this is a British film, maybe this is maybe even an American film, you can't really tell, especially because often the casting in Irish films is clearly international in its nature. Does anyone have a perspective on that? Like, is this how we do it? Like, is this how we break into the international art house market?
There is definitely some truth to that. I mean, you still run up against certain barriers, like say Netflix, for instance, still has a sort of an issue. There's no historical data there with like Irish language fiction filmmaking for them to take a punt on stuff. But then just different sort of distributors that we've been talking to have made the point that there is an interest in sort of indigenous language cinema. And you look at what won the Golden Bear this year in Berlin was a Catalan film, and the sort of Basque cinema as well has really been kind of having a moment in recent years. And so there just seems to be a kind of an appetite, or there's something kind of cool about these indigenous language films that we've certainly picked up on from just discussions with different distributors. But it is still a barrier for some, maybe that's more to do
I still
with
think the
the
bigger
kind of larger.
distributors would still see it as a hurdle to get
Yeah.
across that it's a foreign language title, and it's like when you're trying to sell a black and white film, or it's that kind of saying.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. And
yeah,
I guess
yeah,
that's
yeah.
sort of summarized in like
Yeah.
Netflix, for instance, they're still considering
Yeah.
it, but they haven't kind of been jumping out to say yeah. Whereas like Mubi are very interested in film. So like that, you know what I mean? It's like a smaller scale, but it's a more sort of niche and more sort of cinephile kind of audience, I guess.
I mean, in Roshan Frank's case, so it's playing in, it's just been accepted. Like, it was in Santa Barbara, it was in Sonoma, it's in Indianapolis, these are not Irish enclaves. It's traveling purely on its own merits. You know, like the email accepting it to Indianapolis, which is filling in now. Like they just talked about, we just love this, you know, and so the whole email is about the film, and the language is not mentioned at all. Good, bad, or indifferent. You know, they're enjoying the film. You know, I don't know whether they even know that it's in Irish, if you know what I mean by that. It's just the film that's doing it. So,
But then festivals exist slightly outside the market. You know
totally
what I mean?
that.
So
No,
it's
absolutely that.
just a sort of commercial reality as well
Yeah.
that you do come up against.
Like Black 47, I think, you know, didn't do well for Netflix on, you know, when it carried, so that, you know, they're just going on numbers, I'm guessing, in that way, like, oh, did not compute, not doing that one. You know, because English, as we know, English is not the dominant language on Netflix for TV programs. It is for films, but it's not for TV programs. So they go by numbers, and they haven't been convinced yet. One of them will break through, and one of them will be convinced.
And we'll break the mold.
Now that audiences are getting used to watching subtitled drama on the streamers, I envied something that you can do then. Like some of your dialogue, the volume of it, Colin and The Quiet Girl, drops to almost inaudible. And you go, oh, they're so lucky. They could do that because that's really realistic in a scene, but you have the subtitle. And equally, when you're working with actors who speak, you know, English as we do in Ireland, you have a huge amount of pressure around words they use from your distributor or your sales agent. Huge pressure trying to translate Hiberno English into English. And it's a massive it's a subject that it's continually contested in script. But when you're putting a subtitle, the actor has actually got greater freedom there in a way, you know, that's like there's debates always around when an Irish film made in English using our own accents. There's always debates around, do we need a subtitle here?
Yeah.
You know, so I was kind of interested in both of you, and just to comment on the cultural moment. I remember when Eric was out, I knew a load of people going to see it at the cinema. But not because it was in Irish, but now I know people, but because they really wanted to see the film. And then with Colleen Kuhn, I know a lot of people wanting to engage in the Irish, not despite the Irish, but there is a cultural moment, and the shift is massive in only 3 years, is it? Not even 3 years?
Yeah. But it's interesting just on the English-Irish thing. Like there are definitely audiences, non-Irish audiences who've watched Colin Kuhn who've missed some of the English meaning of some of the English dialogue because it is that very thick Hiberno English. Whereas they obviously all of the Irish is, you know, ironically understood because they're reading the subs, you know. So that's definitely true. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's the way to have it. Just, I think our time is done here. You know, in one way, what I would have to say, it's really nice in the world we're living in the moment to have a really nice, positive conversation about something really wonderful that's happening, and just to thank everybody here this morning for coming here and talking about it and whatever, and just to say thanks a million.
Thank you.